ahead and now.
You're listening to Truth Hertz Radio with your host, Charles Giuliani. Ken.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this, well, I won't call it a first installment on paranormal because I was actually on here a couple of years ago. Some of you might remember the show that I had on here. Ran for, about a year anyway. But I'm now back. I want to welcome my buddies on Tal Talk, especially Scott Fair that helped do the music, and, of course, Natasha, a friend of mine in Pennsylvania, helped work on the commercials there for the show, as well as the intro. This show, just like what I used to do before, is going to be a hodgepodge of different topics. I'll be having guests from time to time, also going off on my own rants, covering a variety of different subjects, mostly politics, but I'm into aberrant science, aberrant history, aberrant medicine, you name it. So anything that's off the beaten track, because what's offered to us on the beaten track is mostly pablum. So we want to get away from that. We're not interested in the corporate profits of the multinational corporations that, for the most part, are not interested in what benefits us. So we want to move away from what profits them. We want to talk about what profits us. And the truth profits us. And we don't get the truth from these corporations. They want to keep the truth from us. So that's what we're going to be talking about on this show, hence the name Truth Hertz, a little play on words, spelled H-E-R-T-Z, like megahertz. Getting the truth out over the megahertz, but also the truth does hurt. As I always say, it might not be what we want to hear, but it is what we need to hear. And we need to be willing to swallow the bitter truth instead of the sweet lie. The sweet lie might settle well in our mouths, but not in our stomachs. Whereas the truth might not settle well in our mouths, but it will settle well in our stomachs. And that's what this country needs. We need a couple stiff shots of truth. We've been getting enough lies for too long now. We've been falling for them. Because of that, it's gotten us in a lot of trouble. And one of those big lies, which is the topic of my show today, is current so-called bailout. I hate to use that word because that's not what it is. We're not bailing out anything. In fact, if this was a bailout, with all of the trillions of dollars that have already been distributed, you would think that the economy would show signs of serious recovery here. But that's not happening, is it? This bailout scam has reached, phenomenal proportions, or it's almost at $10 trillion now. Many of you will recall back in late September it started at $700 billion, and a lot of people were upset about that because that is, of course, an exorbitant figure, almost $1 trillion, but it's nothing in comparison to what it has now become. And I think it's grown because they have seen that the public, for the most part anyway, wasn't doing anything, wasn't really saying much about it. There were a few protests here and there, but nothing major. So they realized, hey, all systems go. We're not getting any potentially significant resistance, so let's just expand this thing. And that's what they've done. Ever since late September, we've seen this thing go from $700 billion, again, to, approaching $9 trillion. And they're not done. Obama now, coming into office as of tomorrow, has proposed all kinds of other so-called bailout packages. He's got this stimulus package thing, which is pretty sad because while so many people are hailing his coming administration as a great hope for this country, he's offering us the same trash, the same Mickey Mouse solutions that Bush has been giving us. And they're not solutions at all. He talks about change, but isn't it astonishing, or it ought to be astonishing, that what he's proposing, he's not even in office yet, and what he's already proposing as part of our, economic recovery plan is the same thing that Bush has been offering us for years. These economic stimulus packages. Where do people think this money's coming from? It's designed to fool you, to trick you into thinking that a solution is being provided. They're handing you checks. Bush gave one for $300 or $600, or everybody got at least $300. But if you had kids, you got $300 for each additional kid. So some people were getting $900, $1,200, $1,500 checks. So that was to get them all excited and kissy, so they would think that the government was really out to help them. But the irony was, all the while they were giving you these checks for, 600 or 1,000, whatever. The cost of living was soaring through the roof. The prices of food were going up. Prices of gas, of course, now that's come down. But stick around, that's destined to jump back up again. But, over the summer, we were getting hammered with these scandalously outrageous oil prices and gas prices. So, yeah, people got the so-called stimulus checks, but what good is it if you got a $600 or $1,000 check and yet your cost of your gas and your oil bill had gone up 300-400%? It's a scam. But the truth is, these stimulus packages aren't even beneficial to us because in the long run, what they're doing is increasing our debt and devaluating our currency by printing more money into circulation. All the money that they keep putting into circulation devaluates the currency of the money that's already out there, and so it creates inflation. But not only that, but again, it increases the debt. Where do people think this money comes from? I think a lot of Americans are under the illusion or the delusion that the government has a warehouse full of cash somewhere, and so they'll just set aside a certain portion. We'll give this to the American public. We'll just mail them out checks, and we have this money here to back up the checks. No, that's not how it works at all. Those stimulus packages come to us in the form of loans that the government takes from the Fed. The Fed, which is what we owe most of our national debt to in the first place. Those familiar with history, especially the history of Germany and the Weimar Republic, will remember that this is what took Germany down in the 1920s and early 30s. The German economy was in a desperate situation. They were heavily burdened with the Versailles Treaty-imposed reparation payments after World War I. And, the interest rates, as well as the payments themselves, were beyond their means. And so Germany kept defaulting. They couldn't meet these obligations. And so what the bankers did was come along with a phony solution, just like what's being offered to us now. They gave them loans. One was called the Dawes Plan, one was called the Young Plan. But it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you're in a debt situation, taking loans is not going to solve your problems. Not long-term. Short-term, it might seem to solve your problems because you have more money floating out there in the economy. The illustration I like to use is, if you're broke and your check is already spent before you even get it at the end of the week because it's going out to bills you owe, the only way, nowadays to really increase your purchasing power is to get a credit card. But that's a trap, isn't it? It'll help you in the short term because you'll be able to go out and buy a few items in the store that you need and take your wife out to eat to a fancy restaurant. And so the illusion exists that you still have purchasing power. So, you're not in debt after all. You're still able to buy things, and you've got a feeling of comfort. You feel at ease. But, a month later, when the bills start coming in for those credit card charges, now you realize you're in a worse predicament than you were before. So you have an option here. You can tighten your belt and live off the few scraps you got left in your fridge over the next, month or whatever, and tighten your belt and try to get those credit cards paid off, those credit charges paid off, and start from scratch. Or you can create the illusion that you still have purchasing power, go out and get another credit card. Well, that's exactly what they're doing with us. They're not doing anything to get rid of the debt. They're increasing the debt, taking more loans, and these loans generate money into the economy, which give the illusion of purchasing power and the illusion of stability for the economy. That's all they're doing, guys. They're giving credit card charges to us and creating the illusion we have purchasing power and hiding the fact that we're in serious debt trouble. And so what Obama is doing is the same thing Bush has been doing, or what he wants to do, I should say, what he's been proposing to do, is the same thing Bush has been doing. He wants to give out these stimulus packages. So to give the public the illusion that, hey, this is great, I got money, I got purchasing power. But what he's doing in the long run is jerking us over even more, creating more debt and sinking us more into the hole, devaluating our dollar, creating more inflation. These policies, again, the same exact type policies are what brought the Weimar Republic down. Right after World War I, the German mark was equal with the British pound in trade value. Yet by the late 20s and on into the early 30s, when Hitler took power, the mark had sunk to 1/20 billionth that of the British pound. The German people were in a desperate state of affairs, and this was all by design. And once again, I hate to say it, but this is exactly what they're doing to us. If you strip away the rhetoric and look beyond the phony labels that they're giving this, again, the stimulus package and whatnot, it amounts to the exact same thing that happened with Germany. They're taking us down right now the same way they took down the Weimar Republic. And, so many people are looking to Obama as the savior now. We got to change. We got rid of the neocons, got rid of Bush, and now, we got a fresh face in the White House, and, this is going to be a change for America. Folks, it's no change at all. Sorry to tell you. Obama is every bit as much a globalist, every bit as much of a sellout as the Bush crowd was. Those who caught his speech in Berlin back on July 24th of this past summer, he stated emphatically that global citizenship is a burden we all must share. It's not a choice. It's a must, he said. It's something that must be done for our common humanity and our common security. He says Americans and Europeans alike are going to be required to do more, not less. That's interesting, isn't it? We haven't had our economy sucked dry enough as it is, and now they want us to do more, to give more money for their cause, send more of our kids to fight their phony wars for their cause, their oil-grabbing wars, their wars of imperialistic conquest, to set up their world government or their new world order. They're coming out left and right and calling it by name. A week ago today, Henry Kissinger wrote an article in the International Herald Tribune in which he mentioned the New World Order 2 or 3 times. And he actually looked at the current economic crisis and the bailout as something great. Well, of course, because he, along with his financial looters, staged this whole thing to bring this economy down, folks. They want to destroy the United States economy and, indeed, the economies of the rest of the nations on Earth. In fact, they're all hurting right now. Just like in 29, when the U.S. Stock market crashed, it had, through the ripple effect, affected all the other economies around the world. So they looted countries around the world and, lived high off the hog and set up the criteria for what became World War II, which was another step toward their global domination scheme. After World War I, which they also set up and profiteered from, they created the League of Nations. That was to be the catalyst for world government. It failed. So they staged World War II, profiteered off of it all along, and then at the end of that war introduced the United Nations, which was nothing more than the League of Nations with a facelift, but with the same goal in mind. It was to be the catalyst for world government. Well, lo and behold, folks, they're trying to set off yet another world war. And this time, if it happens, if they get their way, what's going on in the Middle East right now with Israel and Palestine, although it seems like Israel's backing off a little bit, I think they're realizing, son of a gun, it's not working. The Arabs aren't taking the bait. They were hoping that Syria and Iran were going to get involved, and then Russia and China, and they'd have one big global bloodshed extravaganza. And then in the wake of that calamity, what they had hoped is that they could introduce another entity like the UN, and then this time say, we don't have a choice. We've had 3 world wars now in the past 100 years. We have to have world government to prevent another such war. It's not a choice. You have to do it. It's the only way we're going to prevent this, just to sell you on the idea. They want world government. That's all there is to it. Every tyrant in history has had this goal in mind. This has been their dream. Verwohl the Welt. Every sinister villain in every cartoon you watched as a kid. This is what the villain wanted, right? To rule the world. That's always been the case. Every page of human history is stained with accounts like this, of a bloodthirsty, money-hungry, power-grubbing tyrant that wanted to rule the world. Well, that's what we're dealing with here. This is exactly what's going on right now, except these world-ruling wannabes are working in collaboration. It's not one single individual that wants to rule the world. They realize the only way they're really going to get this to work is if all these would-be tyrants from every nation on the globe work together, cooperatively, and then they'll share pieces of this big pie with each other. They'll all be joint rulers of the masses. There'll only be a few, maybe tens of thousands of people at the helm of this, benefiting from all of it, and the rest of the 6.5 billion population will be abject slaves to them. And so, again, this bailout is a big part of it. It's to bring the economy down. But let's talk in detail about this bailout. and see just what a scam it is, and see that this is, in fact, exactly where it's bringing us, toward this goal of world government. On September 22nd, just this past September, the stock market fell 777 points. That was the beginning of this whole fiasco. Some of you might recall that the Senate met in a closed-door session back in March of last year. And for months, people were wondering exactly what the heck went on there. This has only been done, maybe 4 or 5 times in the history of this country. And so, there was all kinds of talk brewing. What was the discussion about? What was the topic? What was on the agenda? Well, back over the summer, it emerged. Some people had leaked out some information about the goings-on at that meeting, and essentially what it was about, it was discovered, is that they met to handle a coming economic crisis that they said was going to hit the United States in the fall. An economic crisis of, massive proportions was going to hit the U.S. in the fall. Interestingly, this 777-point drop, that's an interesting number, too, isn't it? I really don't think they pick these numbers at random. They have complete control over the economy, and they play little mind games with us. 777. In any case, that occurred, don't forget, on September 22nd, which was the official first day of the fall. And that was what this private senatorial private session was all about, a coming crisis, economic crisis that would hit the U.S. in the fall. And the main purpose of the meeting was how they were going to handle the crisis on their behalf, not our behalf. They're not concerned about us, folks. They're only concerned about covering their butts, how they were going to deal with it. Probably discussing things like, heading for shelter in the underground bunker in Washington that was built during the Cold War. There's basically a self-contained, self-sufficient city that they've built for themselves down there, enough food to last 10 years, independent water supply, power supply, generators, you name it. And so I'm sure that was the topic of discussion, that we're going to have to go under there, go into hiding, because there's going to be rioting and looting. Some of you might recall on October 1st, this was on the Army Times website, they had troops stationed around the country poised to leap into action should there be massive public demonstrations and civil disobedience. They were anticipating that the public might finally wake up and take action in the wake of this scandalous, ridiculous bailout fraud. And so they had, military troops positioned strategically around the country, ready to leap into action to crush out any civil dissent that might arise. That never happened, of course. They didn't have to jump into action because the public didn't take action. So that just told them, hey, great! That means we can up the ante even more. And so that's what they've done ever since. They've kept adding on to this bailout. Now, again, we're almost at $10 trillion. Anyway, in the wake of this September 2nd economic debacle on Wall Street, the panic that ensued led to a cry from Wall Street for the government to, quote, bail them out. The whole thing was a complete Ponzi scheme, and yet, they should have been allowed to suffer the consequences of their actions, playing games with people's money. This was basically the equivalent, on a much grander scale, of the Madoff fiasco. First it was $50 billion, then it was $100 billion. We'll never know exactly how much it was, but it's on the line of this, what led to this bailout. It's the same thing, folks. Playing games with your money, with your investment funds, your retirement funds, whatnot. And, they crashed the whole thing. Oops, we took a chance, we lost. No, now you got to bail us out. We screwed you over in the first place, but now you got to bail us out after we screwed you over. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is. That's really what it amounts to. So a bill was introduced a week later that asked for, once again, $700 billion. What was so amazing is that this number was chosen arbitrarily. The Los Angeles Times of September 29th had this to say about this outlandish figure. It really was arbitrarily picked. This is what it said. It's not based on any particular data point, a Treasury spokesperson told Forbes.com on Tuesday. We just wanted to choose a really large number. You gotta be kidding me. Folks, this is unbelievable. Oh, but it gets even more scandalous than that. but just think of this for a minute. Wall Street plays this risky gambling game with derivatives, and then they make up an exorbitant fee, an exorbitant number, and they tell the government, we want the public to bail us out. Now, if this government had any scruples, and again, I include Obama in this because Obama voted for it, just like McCain, just like everybody else in Congress pretty much. They voted for this, all of them, without question, even though it was obvious, even to the dumbest among us, that this thing was a scam. It was already known when he cast his vote in favor of the bailout that the figure was picked arbitrarily. It was already known that, and this is the next point I'm going to be talking about here, it was already known that they did not want this bill subjected to close scrutiny. And so let me go into that right now. In the text of the bailout bill itself, this outrageous statement was made, and I quote, "Decisions by the Secretary pursuant to the authority of this Act are non-reviewable and committed to agency discretion and may not be reviewed by any court of law or any administrative agency." Can you get more blatantly obvious than that this whole thing was a scam from the word go? The text of the bill that nearly everyone in Congress voted for stated emphatically that this bill was not to be reviewed by any court of law or any administrative agency. Pass it, shut up, don't ask any questions. And now it's emerged since then that a great deal of this money, millions upon millions of dollars worth, have been handed out in the form of bonus checks to the very scoundrels that rigged this whole thing in the first place. Oh, America, the stuff that you will put up with. Unbelievable. In spite of the fact that this monumental fraudulent bill refused to allow any oversight of its proposal, it was passed on October 3rd with flying colors. And get this, an additional $150 billion was tacked on at that point. I remember it was a Friday that they had the vote. People had been protesting all up and down Wall Street against the passage of this thing. And at first it got turned down by the Senate. And so people felt optimistic. Wow, our protests are having an effect. It looks like it's not going to go through. People were very optimistic. Wow, finally Wall Street's going to bite the bullet and get a taste of their own medicine. Nope. It was only turned down as a fraud, just to convince the public that the government's really there to operate in our interest. But then they turned around and not only voted it, but they added another $150 billion. And then Pelosi said, we should add another 150, so it went up to $1 trillion within the first week and a half after the thing was proposed. It was already at $1 trillion. And then, again, it just continued to rise from there. Everybody has been coming forward and asking for handouts. Even the porn industry. I don't know if this was some kind of joke or what on their part, but the porn industry actually asked Congress for a cut in the bailout. Unbelievable, folks. Unbelievable. Everybody and his brother realizing that everybody else is getting away with it. Hey, why not? Let's try. Let's see if we can get a cut of this pie. And would you be surprised to find out, as I said, that multiplied millions of dollars of this money has been given out in bonus checks? Look it up, guys. It's all over the Internet. Mainstream articles covering this stuff. This is, not someone's opinion. This is all fact. This can all be verified. I'm sure many of you are already aware of a lot of this, but this is a fact. Millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, have already been awarded. This is why they didn't want any legal bodies oversight or any court or, any review of it at all. Non-reviewable, it said. This is why. Because this money really it's not a bailout at all. In fact, if you dug into it even deeper, you'd discover that not only is this money being given out for bonus checks, but it's not bailing the economy out at all. It's going into people's pockets. All of it. All of it. Those hundreds of millions I mentioned is only what's emerged on the surface. But, if you dig into this, guaranteed you'll discover not a penny of it has anything to do with bailing out the economy. It's just pigs at the trough having a big potluck fiesta here. it's unbelievable. They're feeding, sucking off of the public, draining our coffers dry, bringing this economy down, and laughing all the way to the bank in the process. And, of course, what they're going to do with all that money they sucked off of us is they're going to turn around while it still has value and invest it in commodities, in properties, in gold and whatnot, real tangible assets. So when the damn dollar does crash, pardon my French, it won't matter to them because all of their wealth is secured. But to the multiplied millions of people in this country who trust the phony paper dollar system that they've pawned off on us for decades on end now, it'll mean the end of their financial standing. This is what they're doing, folks. Believe it or not, your government is comprised of nothing but treasonous, traitorous trash that are selling this country out, destroying our economy, leaving us with nothing, and walking away with everything. They don't care about this country. They're not running this country in the interests of this country. They're running this country in the interest of themselves and their supporters on Wall Street who want to tear this country to shreds. This country's been a major barrier in their way toward world government because of the ideology that this country has held. You know, traditionally this country's been isolationist, stay out of foreign affairs, have trade deals with foreign countries, yes, but don't get involved with them politically, stay independent. This country has believed traditionally in upholding its sovereignty and its constitution. They want to destroy all of that, and that's a great deal of what the North American Union is all about, which Bush has already signed into law 4 years ago. And if things continue to go as they have been, unfortunately nothing indicates otherwise, we're going to have a North American Union established here by next year, a year from this month. By January of 2010, it's due to kick in. You're going to have a merger between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, very much akin to the European Union. They even have a new currency proposed called the Amero, the equivalent of the euro. You will not have anything, any dollar that has United States written on it. Not that our current dollar is anything to get excited about, but it's not even going to say United States on it anymore. It's going to say North American Union, currency, Amero, whatever. And it will be the official end of the Constitution. They've already pretty much trashed it to begin with in the wake of 9/11, with things like the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security Act. But this will mean the complete end. All new laws will be drafted up. There will be no more United States of America, folks. That's their goal. And unless we wake up and face that reality and fast, it's going to be all over for us. There's still people in denial that this stuff is going on when it's even talked about in mainstream news now. I mean, Lou Dobbs talks about this all the time. Keith Olbermann has voiced his opinion quite a bit on this stuff. And, so it's not like this is off-the-beaten-track stuff that you got to look on conspiracynut.com or paranoid political dissidents.org. This stuff is out there in mainstream. You can't deny it anymore. It's real. It's happening as we speak. And so understand that what we're going to get under Obama is no different. They're just going to change the window dressing, but the same slop is going to be for sale on the shelves in the store. But how, you may ask, could such a scam have been pulled off, this bailout fiasco? Why would Congress sell us out the way that they have? Well, first of all, you might be interested to know that most members of Congress have investments in the very companies that were recipients of this money. But there was another and even more shocking factor that inspired the passage of this bill. Representative Brad Sherman of California stated before the House on October 2nd, this past October, that, quote, a few members of the House were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no. They were threatened that martial law would be imposed in America if they did not vote in favor of this bill. It emerged later that that warning came directly from Paulson, the Treasury Secretary. So there you go, folks. There you go. This is your government in action. This is what goes on behind the scenes, what most Americans don't know about because they don't pay attention. They don't dig into things for themselves. They don't look at the lumps under the rug. They just accept it, carte blanche, what they're told on Fox News and ABC, NBC, CBS, which are all owned by the same globalist trash on Wall Street that have been rigging this whole system to operate in their favor at the expense of everyone else. How can you trust news agencies that are run by billionaire banker buddies that are selling this country out. I mean, let's face it, let's get real here and stop playing fantasy games and hiding our head in the sand. Our media are a bunch of liars. They exist for one reason only, and Dan Rather himself brought this out in May of 2002. He was interviewed by the BBC. He spoke a lot more candidly because, of course, this is a foreign news broadcast. He wouldn't speak so openly here. He knows he can't. But he said that the purpose of the media in the United States today is to protect the backsides of those in power. And he said, I'm ashamed to say that I can't exempt my own self from this criticism. He was admitting that he's been a part of the game all along. I think in his senior years, he's looking back over his life and feeling regretful and wants to go to his grave with a little bit more of a conscience. So he's been coming out and admitting, making statements like this, that yes, the media is a bunch of scam artists. They lie on behalf of the government or they won't have a job. Maybe they won't have a life if they don't play the game and do what they're told. But there you have it, folks. This is why America has no idea what exactly is going on behind the curtain. But yes, the old wizard with his smoke and mirror show, thundering his voice, instilling fear in the masses, is nothing but a crinkled-up old fart behind the curtain pulling the strings. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. That's the one thing the government fears the most, is that you'll pull the curtain aside to see what's behind there, pressing the buttons. It's time we wake up and realize that we have a government that's far more afraid of us than what they want us to be of them. They have us cowering in fear in the corner when we have them outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1. How long, America, are you going to continue to play this game? The time to wake up is now. If you wait any longer, it's going to be too late. They will have the tanks rolling down the streets, and they will implement martial law, just like they threatened Congress to do if they didn't pass the little bailout scam. We will have the troops going down the street in tanks. We're going to look like the Gaza Strip here before too long if we don't do something now while we have the chance. And what we need to do, and it's very simple, is simply refuse to play the game anymore. I would love to see a national strike where people said, that's it, I'm not going to work. You need me more than I need you, phony government. You need me more than I need you, you scoundrelous, sellout, multinational, filthy, traitorous corporations. You can't survive as long as I can. I can go a few days or even a week without food, but you can't go without my slave labor to exploit me and fund your phony fiasco for global government. If people in this country en masse would, just for a week, go on strike, that would shut the system down. Everything would come to a grinding halt. The corporations and those who run them would be soiling their diapers overnight. The government itself would be shut down because there'd be nobody to exploit, money from their paychecks through their scandalous extortion racket called the income tax. The whole system would come to a grinding halt. The solution is very simple, it's nonviolent, and it's powerfully effective. But are you going to get the comatose, Prozac-popping, Fox-watching drones in this country to get off their keisters and actually do this? I hate to say it, but I don't feel very optimistic about this. But that is the solution. That's the solution. America, you'd better wake up and fast because your country is burning. The arsonists have set it aflame. You don't see the smoke. You can't smell it. You don't see the flames. How in the world can you miss it? It's been on fire for quite some time now, and the flames are raging. Are you going to put this fire out and start rebuilding, or are you just going to sit back and let the whole flippin' thing burn to the ground and turn to ashes, including your own selves? Because that's what they're doing. You see, politicians are doing exactly what's expected of them. Every politician in all of recorded human history eventually realizes that their public has gone to sleep. They're in a coma, and now it's time to have fun. They're not looking. They're not listening. Hey, let's skim a little money off the top here and line our pocket. Hey, let's give some money to our buddies that help support our phony campaign to get us in office. Hey, let's see what we can get away with next. That's exactly what they're doing. You know the old saying, how do you tell when a politician is lying? His lips are moving. Well, our politicians' lips are moving left and right, and that's all we're getting from them is lies and scams. And we are privy to this. We are supportive of this because we don't do or say anything about it. In fact, we're allowing them to pick our pockets and fund all of this. You're paying for your own enslavement, America. How do you like that? bailout. Bailout. What about the millions of people who have lost their jobs and lost their homes in the past few years? They need bailing out. Where's the government to help them? These people are thrown out on the streets. The government's job is supposed to be to protect the poor from the rich, the weak from the strong, but it's doing the very opposite. Naturally, you're going to see crime rates soaring. And of course, the government loves that too. They want the crime rates to soar because they can pass more stringent laws to increase their power and take more of your rights away. Let the crime rate go up. Who cares? It's not going to affect us. Obama isn't too worried either. He's got, 40-something thousand people who are going to be guarding him tomorrow. You know how much money that's going to cost you? 40-something thousand people are going to be guarding him tomorrow. Isn't that nice? The whole rest of the nation is suffering. People losing their jobs, losing their homes, out in the street, can't afford, to heat their homes, to feed their kids. And, many more millions are slated to be losing their jobs. Huge layoffs are coming up this year, much, much more than what we've been seeing. Companies are closing left and right, going out of business, can't compete with the big globalist multinational corporations. Where's the government to help bail out, the middle class and the lower class? No, there's nowhere to be seen. No help is forthcoming. This is just like what they did in Katrina. You do remember Katrina, don't you? 50 countries offered food, water, clothing, medicine. They were all turned away. FEMA would not allow the help to come in. Now, why do you suppose that was? What possible legitimate reason could you come up with to explain that? There is none. They wanted to maximize the death toll. So when Halliburton come in later, they could grab up all that freed up land, you see, and build their businesses, which would be funded by Congress with the so-called rebuilding fund, $57 billion. That wasn't for the poor people to rebuild their homes. Knock it off. That was money right into the pockets of Halliburton to build their businesses that you flippin' paid for. None of that money went to the poor people who needed it because most of them died anyway. They died from criminal neglect. Far more died from that policy than what died from the storm itself. But you know what? We'll never know the numbers. We'll never know. Because Bushy Boy would not allow camera crews to go in there and film the carnage after the fiasco. In fact, for 8 days this went on. FEMA was caught cutting communication lines so people couldn't get word out what was going on in that city. Trucks were lined up from around the country with supplies. Not only were they not allowed to get in, they wouldn't allow people to get out of the city to get the help they needed. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? They were there to help the people. Well, they were helping some people, no question about it, but not the ones that needed it. They were helping the people on Wall Street and the people of Halliburton. That's who they were helping. Heck, they did it in June after the big tornado there in Des Moines. The thugs with badges were out there threatening people. They were going to shoot them or bash them over the head with their clubs if they dared try to go into their homes and salvage anything that was still savable as the flood waters were rising. Wouldn't let people return to their homes. And you know why? Because some of those homes they were planning on demolishing later and didn't want the people to see that, oh, wow, look at that, the floodwaters didn't even come near my home. They didn't want them to see which homes were really damaged, which weren't. They wanted to tell them later, sorry, we couldn't save your home, it was washed away. When in reality, they just bulldozed the thing because they want some of that land freed up so they can get their NAFTA highway, conveniently going right through that same area. Not only that, but we lost most of the ethanol production plants, a major competitor for the oil industry. Oh, people, it's time to wake up and smell the roses here. Anyway, to further show what a scam that the bailout bill was, which massively, once again, increased inflation and our national debt, notice what Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur said just prior to its passage. She gave a very interesting talk before Congress, and I got some of the highlights of that speech recorded here. She said, let's play Wall Street bailout. Rule number 1, rush the decision. Time the game in the week before Congress is set to adjourn and just 6 weeks before an historic election so that your opponents will be preoccupied, pressured, distracted, and in a hurry. Rule number 2, oh yes, the timing was impeccable. Just like the Israeli invasion in the Gaza Strip. The timing is impeccable. Rule number 2, she said, disarm the public through fear. Warn that the entire global financial system will collapse and the world will fall into another Great Depression. Control the media enough to ensure that the public will not know that this bailout will indebt them for generations to come, taking them trillions of dollars into debt, taking money from them that they earned and deserve to keep. See, she knows it's a scam. She knows this whole thing was planned. Of course it was. It's a fraud. Bailout, once again, folks, it's no bailout. If this was a bailout, you would already see signs of the economy picking up. No, instead we're told more layoffs are coming. Obama is warning of a severe crisis if something isn't done to fix it. And what is he proposing? Congress needs to pump the economy with massive amounts of money. That's just what the Dawes and the Young plan did to Germany, folks. To ensure their collapse, take more loans. And that's what the stimulus packages are all about. It's more loans, kids. I hope any Obama fans out there listening can finally see the light now. He's no change, folks. He was handpicked from day one. He's one of them. Sorry to disappoint you, but you got suckered again, America. Rule number 3, she said, control the playing field and set the rules. Hide from the public and most of Congress just who is arranging this deal. Communicate with the public through leaks to media insiders. Limit any open congressional hearings. Communicate with Congress via private teleconferencing calls. Heighten political anxiety by contacting each political party separately. Treat members of Congress condescendingly. Remember the threat of martial law? Telling them that the matter is so complex that they must rely on those few insiders who really do know what's going on. Rule number 4, divert attention and keep people confused. Manage the news cycle, which we know they do, so that Congress and the public have no time to examine who destroyed the banking system. Rule number 5, she says, always keep in mind that the goal is to privatize gains to a few and socialize the losses to the many. She nailed it. She's exactly right in every point. She said for 30 years, in one financial scandal after another, Wall Street game masters have kept billions of dollars of their gain and shifted their losses to the American taxpayers. Absolutely, and here we go again. Once this bailout is in place, the greed game will begin again. Guys, this is what they did in 1929. We're running out of time. I can't go into the details, but they staged the crash of 1929, no question about it. And then the ensuing depression, they made out like bandits. In the midst of the depression, while the whole nation is suffering, and yet the banksters at the top rungs of the ladder are making a killing. FDR, who himself was a Wall Street tycoon, his family going back over 100 years were Wall Street tycoons, Clinton, Roosevelt, Kermit Roosevelt. He passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act of March 9th, 1933. Banking Relief Act, like the banks needed relief, it was the public that needed relief. Anyway, he passed this act, and as part of that act, he required all Americans by April, the next month, to hand in all of their privately owned gold. Those who did not comply were sentenced to a $10,000 fine and or a 10-year prison sentence. That was a stiff fee back then. And where did that gold go? It went to the Federal Reserve, the private banking monopoly that staged the 1929 crash in the first place and profiteered off of it while everybody else suffered. He gave them everyone's privately owned gold. We don't even know how much gold that was. It was in the multiplied billions of dollars back then in 1933 value. All this privately owned gold was shifted over into private Swiss accounts overseas, and As if that wasn't bad enough, he turned around less than a year later, and he devaluated the paper money that the American people traded their gold in for by 59%. Until Bushy Boy came along with this multi-trillion-dollar pocket-picking fiasco. That was the biggest heist in all of recorded human history. But now FDR has had his record beat. Bushy Boy, as it turns out, has beaten a lot of records. Previously, the record set on the most debt ever accrued in this country's history was done under Reagan, or should I say Daddy Bush, because he was the real president behind the scenes during those years. But, more debt was accrued in that period than all previous presidents combined, but now that record has been beat by Junior. In fact, that record was beat before the bailout bill was even introduced. But now, with the bailout figures, you add that in, and there's no question, no contender out there. Nobody can even come close to winning the trophy now. George W. Bush has set an unbeatable, well, I shouldn't say unbeatable, I'm sure. This present scoundrel now coming in tomorrow is probably going to try to beat that record, but right now the record still holds, uncontested. George W. Bush has created more debt for this country than all previous presidents combined. Of course, more jobs have been hemorrhaged out of this country under Bush's watch. He's rewarded corporations with tax breaks to send their jobs overseas. How could that benefit this country, folks? It can't. It can only hurt it, and that's all it's intended to do. We've had more mortgage foreclosures under this scoundrel than any president in all of American history. All kinds of records being set, and these records have nothing to do with benefiting the country. They have everything to do with destroying and dismantling this country. The trend has been, unfortunately, for decades on end now, that with every succeeding president in the Oval Office, things continue to get worse and worse and worse. Well, we've seen what Bush has done in the past 8 years. A man who wasn't even elected, by the way, in 2000 or 2004. They rigged both those elections. But now, what do you think we're in store for with this guy? The one that most Americans, the dumb mutton-chomping sheep out at pasture there, who are hailing this guy as their hero, what do you think is going to happen under his watch? Once again, the trend has been with every succeeding president, we've been taken further and further down the rat hole. Where do you think we're going to go now? It's obvious. He's made it clear already. Did you know in that speech he gave in Germany last summer, he actually said that, Americans, I think I mentioned this in the beginning of the show, Americans and Europeans are going to be required to do more, not less. More, not less. So you see, he has every intention. And he even said this, a change in the leadership in Washington will not mean a change in this burden, the burden of global citizenship, i.e. world government, the New World Order, call it what you will. He said a change in leadership in Washington won't mean a change in this burden. In other words, it doesn't matter whether I'm voted in or McCain. Both of us are hand-picked puppets, and we're both going to serve the interests of big money and lie to the people and make them think that we're serving their interests. He's lying to us already, and he's not even in office. He's telling us that this economic stimulus package is a change. It's not a change. It's Bush's policy all over again. And he's telling us that it's going to save the economy. We're in a desperate situation. Congress must approve of this. We must have more money pumped into the economy, much, much more money. That's what our problem is, folks. We've had way too much money pumped into the economy, generated through loans to the Federal Reserve, jacking up our debt, jacking up the inflation problem, and he's proposing more of the same thing. Of course things are going to get worse under his watch. I'm not a voice of gloom and doom. I'm a voice of reality. Yes, the truth hurts. So you have a choice. You can continue to play make-believe and think that going into this administration is going to be the salvation of mankind, or you can wake up to the ugly reality that he's going to sell us down the river, flush us down the toilet every bit as much as Bush has done, if not more. Things are going to continue business as usual. There is not going to be any change. The only time change is going to come, it's not going to come from these sellout politicians who are already hand-picked by Wall Street before they even get in office in the first place. Change isn't going to come from them, folks. Change is going to have to come, as it has always had to come, from we the people. The ones who are getting shafted by these policies. They're the ones, the only ones that are concerned about what's going on, and therefore they're the only ones that are ever going to be the ones that we're going to do something about it. The ones who aren't getting shafted, i.e. the politicians, but who have their butts cozily cushioned with big fat wads of cash in their back pockets, they're not going to do anything about it. They don't care. It doesn't affect them. That's why they have no problem, no qualms whatsoever in signing these phony bailout bills. Because it's not their money. they're still going to have their cozy, cushy health insurance policies. They're going to have their six-figure incomes. They're going to have their multi-million-dollar homes and their kickback benefits from the lobbyist groups in Washington on whose interests they operate. Come on, folks, put it together. If something's going to happen, if we're going to have change, it's going to be us doing it. And again, the form I would like to see that in is nothing violent. I would love to see civil disobedience of people simply not showing up to work and thus not paying taxes. The corporations will be shut down. The government itself will be shut down. We'll have them at our mercy, soiling their depends overnight. It's your choice, America. We can do it. Yes, we can. The problem is, no, we have not. Not yet. Voting Obama in is not a yes, we can. It's a yes, we got suckered again. That's what that is. The only way we can say yes, we can and yes, we did is if we take action ourselves instead of sitting back, picking our noses, watching Fox News, popping the Prozac, and thinking that going to the rigged ballot box is going to make a change. Never has, never will make a change. We, the people, have got to do it. So the choice lays before you, America. It's time to get off the couch. Politics is not a spectator sport. And the way you get involved is not to show up at the rigged ballot box fiasco. That's not going to do it. They've got that game rigged and had it rigged a long time ago. Change can and will come if we take such action as I mentioned. But to do otherwise, to just sit back, to not do anything, to not say anything, it's going to be business as usual, and you will wake up probably sooner than you think in a tyrannical, dictatorial system, and people like myself who have been trying to ring the warning bell are going to say, I told you so, as they cart us off to the government concentration camps. Oh, they got them. You better believe they got them. They don't even hide it anymore. It's right out in your face. There's been hundreds of Americans, thousands of Americans, who have already been interred in concentration camps in the wake of war protest rallies and protesting the FTAA in Florida a few years ago, back in 2003. Oh, yeah, they were sent off to FEMA brigades. Anyway, folks, like I said, the truth hurts. We need to face it. We need to deal with it. We need to take action ourselves because our sellout politicians are not going to do that for us. All right, folks, have a great week. We'll catch you next week with another important topic. I hope this country wakes up before it's too late. Take care.
Mm-hmm.